there's all this discussion of institutions being disrupted. And until that model breaks of you have to go through this very structured system, you don't bring knowledge with you, we build all your knowledge, it's disrupted in the right ways. So it can be really personalized. It's going to take, I'm very hopeful that that change will take place, but that's what we're trying to kind of disrupt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's very inefficient right now, a lot of higher education and how it's done.
Hey guys.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Able to join?
Hey.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hey, all right. So, man, what a day. This is never done a non-stop 5 hours of podcast demonstrations before. Now I think I might have a small insight into what it feels like over at Y Combinator. They turn their demo day into like a demo 2-week period where it's just constant presentations. But I love it. This is terrific. So yeah, Rishi, feel free to kick us off and we'll get started.
Of course. So with this week's theme, we were discussing Know Thyself and the personalized economy. WEquil Capital is going to go a bit more in depth into what this personalized economy is. We did write an article too, which has just been published on WEquil Capital's website, so feel free to check it out. So to start off, let's go in depth into the personalized economy. For most of the last century, the world and society lived very homogeneous lives. As the Industrial Revolution made it easy and cheap to buy consumer goods, most people still ended up living in a manner that was very standard and structured. Children would go through the same formal education system while the average person took on a linear and rigid career path, and also engaged in very few widely accepted forms of leisure activity. However, as the world got digitized in the 21st century in recent years, people had access to many other lifestyle choices thanks to the readily available information and content online. This effect accelerated during the pandemic as people were compelled to adopt groundbreaking trends like work from home. The 2020 pandemic also introduced us to new technologies that allowed us to adapt to the changing circumstances, like 3D printing to produce PPE and other important equipment for COVID, genomics technology to develop the mRNA vaccine, and virtual learning platforms which students used when schools were closed. At the same time, decentralized finance protocols also gained traction as the DeFi space grew from a total market value of only 500 million in 2020 to 50 billion in 2021. Alongside everything though, we've also seen a recent startup boom. And by no means this is an exhaustive list of what can be done digitally, but people can start businesses now at low cost with online platforms like Etsy, and even start a potentially monetizable YouTube channel with virtually zero expenditure, aside from creative output, time, and energy. We believe these trends are going to play a very important part in our future. We've identified 5 themes that we believe are going to be crucial to follow as our global economy becomes more personalized. So as we've outlined in our article, these 5 themes are manufacturing with 3D printing, healthcare and genomics, ed tech, decentralized finance and blockchain, and the startup boom. So all in all, I'm looking forward to discussing these themes with you guys in the next hour, and I'm ready to go more in depth with you on each theme and how they each play a role within this new personalized economy that we're seeing unfold. So anyway, let's get started with some discussion.
Well, thank you for that introduction. That was great. It was a lot better than the one I wrote. Yeah, we also have Ari Meltzer on here. He's at his kid's soccer game, but he was early on when we first started doing the podcast. He was with me for the first month or so before we found Rishi in Panama. He was a follower of Intuit Econ. He appreciated what we were doing, wanted to take part, so he wrote an article to showcase, and it was pretty good. was like, oh, maybe I should talk to this guy. I talked to him and I was like, oh man, he's really good. Maybe maybe I should have him on the podcast. And he was on the podcast. I was like, man, this guy's amazing. I wish there were two of them.
Oh,
Wonder what
Then I
happened.
met his brother and I was like, wow, my goodness. But it's just such it's a really good example, I think, of just the power of digitization and how easy it's gotten to collaborate with people around the world. That was already happening before the pandemic, but there was a mental switch where I think the idea of collaborating globally, I mean, it really hit me. It really hit me with Sume's school, and then with meeting you guys, and like you guys know, I mean, we're all over the place. Like we're all over the world. There's a reason why, right? The story of personalization is really quite beautiful. It's a story of having the technology available today for what have always been unique preferences to actually become cost effective and competitive against more standardized, economy of scale driven products and services. And so that's why I think it's so important for kids to learn how to be creative and to exercise and grow their unique gifts because of that personalization. Because it's getting so easy and cheap to create your own version of any product or service, or create an entirely new product or service that doesn't exist, and find 10,000 people in the world that love what you do, and you're basically set for life. If it's based on your unique strengths and you find those people that really appreciate your unique value propositions, that meaning that they're willing to pay more for it, right? There's 8.3 billion people on this planet. 10,000. You find 10,000, that's equilibrium. You're done. You get to spend the rest of your life doing what you love for the people that love you back in a way that is irreplaceable and just has compound interest over time. That's where we're headed, right? So we put out 5 themes, but they're all driven to some degree by digitization. Every single one of these, you can look into it. It really started with the software revolution. But let's go ahead and talk about those piece by piece. Feel free to lead the way, guys. And Ari, you just jump in as you see fit.
of course. So the first theme that you touched on was manufacturing with 3D printing. There are many use cases for 3D printing, or nowadays it's actually called additive manufacturing. A lot of people see it in terms of like an industrial aspect, but the reality is that it can pave the way to allow for a more personalized economy. One example that comes to mind would be, say, someone on Etsy decides they want to start selling this kind of 3D printed product or a decoration or item. They can easily just make a quotation with a company like Proto Labs, which specializes in providing these custom on-demand orders, small batches and stuff, so that that person on Etsy can then take their batch or even sometimes their prototype and then start selling it on the platform. This in turn empowers people to start setting up their own business with very little overhead. Nowadays, they don't have to like wait for overseas shipping for containers to receive their finished product from somewhere else. They can easily just have the manufacturing being done in a 3D printing facility. So that benefits, and it ties in very greatly with the whole idea of a startup boom, because in essence, you could treat like people who are setting up vendor marketplace of their own as their own startup. So that's definitely a very compelling use case. There are several more with 3D printing that I could go into, but I would like to hear some more examples or any thoughts that people have on 3D printing and additive manufacturing, see how it can play into this new developed personalized economy.
Yeah, well, and it goes beyond 3D printing within manufacturing. Like just the idea of having these more autonomous robots is really powerful. So, traditionally, you look at a factory floor, and you're building these very specialized parts and equipment to try to do specific things. And it was quite expensive to build, but then it's also really expensive to retool, right? So, during the pandemic, companies like Materialize switched up, which is a 3D printing company, switched up all the software that they were using to make whatever they were making before, and they immediately started making face masks,
Mhm.
right? And other kinds of pandemic related goods because they were in high demand. They could do that instantly. So 3D printing, you know, it's kind of like it's still related to robotics. When I was writing this article with you, I was thinking like, well, what is the definition of robotics? Because in some ways it is like a robot, right? It's essentially doing the same thing. It's almost like it is a programmable robot to recreate whatever you want. And I
Automatically.
love the way that Michael just like stuck around after. See, now this is the kind of thing that can happen when you stream all the demos together. Um, yeah, man, you're probably just now getting an intro to WEquil Capital, but basically we take it to the next level here with what the young folks are studying and learning about, but then looking at the value creation side in the real economy. So we talk a lot about um, economics and finance, and also market psychology, history, new technologies and innovations. We also talk about individual companies, which reminds me that nothing that we say or write should be interpreted as investing advice. Um, so, so yeah, the robotics part is really quite fascinating too, because you can have the same robot and reprogram it to new use cases. So that's part of the reason why personalization becomes less expensive is that you're able to do that, right? And then taking that a step further, applying machine learning to this, where you can have engineers design the actual product that they want, and then having the robot learn how to create it without the engineer then needing to do. I think Elon Musk said that creating a prototype is about 1% as hard as actually building out the factory to scale production, right? 100 times harder, right? Well, these robots that are getting better and better at learning, wow, now you don't even need to try to go through and write all the software required to operationalize how the robot's going to build your prototype and take it to scale. Massive, massive, massive. And all that's doing is bringing the relative cost down. So this was the cost of the standardized product or the unique product, right? Of like say a car that wasn't the Model T or knives that weren't mass produced in 1920, right? And this was the mass produced version in terms of cost. Like it was so dramatically different that basically a lot of you can imagine it's kind of like what Walmart did to small businesses across like the middle of America, where it just basically was wiping them out, right? That's why they were moving into the factories. Um, and then now all these new technologies are just bringing that down, not quite to the same level, but really, really close, except that you love this version, right? So yeah, robotics. All right, I'll stop.
Yeah, that actually got me thinking of something kind of interesting, and it's I think the reason that these technologies that are so relevant in the personalized economy are so important and have such high value propositions is that by nature they're highly adaptable. So the reason a lot of these technologies came to our awareness during the pandemic or really accelerated during the pandemic is because as a collective, as a world, we needed to adapt to new circumstances. So we needed to adapt the way we did manufacturing very quickly. We needed to adapt the way that we did healthcare. We needed to adapt the way that we conducted business, moving into more digital businesses, streamlining businesses, making them more lean. So by nature, these companies that thrive in the personalized economy are highly adaptable, and companies that are adaptable are able to fit many use cases. And so the value propositions are incredibly enormous. So just what you were mentioning with how people use 3D printing for PPE equipment. I mean, who knows what other things they can come up with and be the first in line, right? No matter what kind of uh, opportunities might come up in the world, it's these technologies that are just efficient and that are intelligent that are going to be having those first mover advantages. And so that's why it's really important to learn about these personalized economy technologies.
And not just learn about it, but so Sume fixed her front door with a 3D printer a year and a half ago. I love telling that story. It's like right after the pandemic hit. And then like a piece in the frame busted in half. And so she just designed one and printed it up. Stuck it in. The first one broke. So she's like, I need a different kind of resin. Boom. Then she made a little video about it. It's like, I should probably look into this. So she and I created a local Facebook group too that, going back to what Justin was talking about a few hours ago, he's helping to automate the creation of new events across Northern Virginia. One of those is our 3D printing group in Falls Church. We're going to make it like a little rapid prototyping, customized, personalized products and services hub. We just sell it right through the school. Is one of the reasons why the startup incubator that's going to come on here in 40 minutes is so powerful. Like, we can design products, put them in the hands of people in the school, and source investors to fund projects all within one community. Like, we can launch a product, build a promo video, build a website, test it with customers, iterate and repeat within a week for free. Because it actually helps the rest of the community when they're doing something cool. Watch out, Y Combinator. They don't even really need you anymore in some ways, because like, you're taking some equity and you're doing it for money, but guess what? They don't need money. We teach the entrepreneurs how to build Flutter apps at WEquil School, led by a girl named Sume, who was offered a job at Google when she's old enough to work. Like, they don't need money. You know what they need? They need to learn how to create personalized products and services that nobody else can do because it's coming from their specific knowledge, right? They need people they can test ideas with. They need to build a network of folks that appreciate and know who they are, that they can be collaborating with and talking about these ideas with. That's what you need. I'm jumping into the startup boom, but that's like number 5. So we covered startup boom, but my goodness, am I excited about these startups. You guys can stick around too if you want at 4 o'clock. We're going to talk to a few of them.
Yeah, so just on the topic of the startup boom, why do you think we've seen, what do you think are the factors that have led to this startup boom? Let's say in the past, maybe even 2 years, it's accelerated. I guess one thing that I can think of right now is with a lot of people being forced, a lot of people that were forced to be stuck at home, or many businesses were destroyed during the pandemic. I think a lot of people realized that you can start businesses with not too many resources, that there's things like Etsy and there's Shopify, resources like that are making it easier for people to set up businesses at a low cost with low risk and at least try it out. Are there any other like reasons that you think that we're seeing so many startups, especially in the last 2 years, if not longer than that?
I mean, there's a whole host of reasons, but a lot of it's driven fundamentally by software. That's not entirely true. It's not just software, but software is huge. So just broadly in terms of kind of the history of personalization, there was a lot more personalization going on before the Industrial Revolution. And so there, the driver for the shift away from personalization was the power of economies of scale. So what were the scarce resources then? Well, money was scarce. Raising the capital to create a business, that was hard. It was very difficult. Like even just financial credit markets, like it was difficult to get a loan unless you were already very wealthy, right? Compared to today, where it's just far easier. Credit. So there were innovations within banking and credit. Um, but the drive of economy of scale was just absolutely enormous, right? So you had a lot of these specialized, essentially every single knife or gun that was created was personalized, right? I mean, some of them not on purpose, right? But we didn't have standardization. Even things like containerization. That was a big innovation that helped with international trade was the idea that we have one functional container that can sit on top of a semi truck. That's the same thing that's loaded onto a barge, right? None of that really existed. And so um, the drive for in the Industrial Revolution really just completely, you know, it created the middle class because you could actually buy goods and services. In many ways, it created like the real economy because so much more of what we did involved buying things from other people instead of just doing things ourselves. That kept going all the way up through the end of World War II. But then it started. That's when it started to kind of get eaten away at. But it was pretty slow. The idea of startups wasn't even much of an idea. The Y Combinator really was driving a lot of bringing that mainstream. But there's a reason why they focused almost entirely on software. Is because you're able to create a business that requires almost no seed capital. And an increasing percentage of the global economy and goods and services that are produced are really like services are really driven by it's just measured in bits instead of atoms, right? So yeah, software is enormous. That was a big push. I'd say the other one was like around the 1980s was when we started to get more personalized news and information because we had like this instead of just like local news, we would get a lot more international news, more different TV channels. Um, so people are able to personalize their information where they're getting it, which has caused some problems. Right? People weren't used to having that kind of freedom as much. There were just three TV channels back in like the 50s.
Yeah.
Everybody watches this, and they were basically saying the same thing too, like the nightly news, right? And so, in some ways, there's been some negative consequences of that because people can just choose whatever news they want. But yeah, then in terms of most recently, like what really took this thing off was all these platform technologies. So platform technologies like Etsy and eBay, Amazon, all the cloud softwares, YouTube for creating your channels, like Upwork, there's just tons and tons and tons of platform technologies that are essentially utility companies. They're part of the global plumbing that allows all these businesses to start up and function and connect with the rest of the world practically for free. And so it took a while for the internet to get to a point where it was mature enough for that sort of business model to blossom. But yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you brought up a really good point as far as the platforms. The what I personally experienced it as well as my mom. An interesting story. So my mom was an artist, and she used to make costume jewelry, but really high end. And what happened was once she was like the first person selling this costume jewelry on eBay in I want to say late 90s, if that's around the time, maybe the mid 90s. And because of it, people were obviously procuring these things from all over the world. And she was able to get her jewelry in all kinds of museums all over the world, like really well-known ones, including like the Museum of Modern Arts and all that stuff. And if it weren't for the platform getting her exposure to people that were just looking for the jewelry and unique products, let's say, she would have never really had exposure outside of the local market. So that really enabled her business to take be taken to another level and opened up tons of doors. And I would imagine there's many people have that story. And then also Ross, who me and him actually met on eBay. I was buying a product that he was selling, and I sent him a
Wow.
message, and I said, "Hey Ross," I said, "Hey sir, this is what I do. I'm one of the larger aggregators of this product in the country, in the world, really." And he actually was kind of not very nice to me, actually, because I guess a lot of people, tried to procure from him as well, and he thought I was trying to make too good of a deal for myself, essentially. But I kept at it, and we eventually became friends, and now we're like lifelong friends. So I think that example. I have tons more examples through Amazon. I know people, like, I'll give you an example. This is a good one as far as like hustle and self-starting, and what these platforms open up. So I know numerous people that actually have Amazon accounts, and eBay, but Amazon is a pretty big, it has a great use case with this type of stuff. And they literally go and they look up prices through the Amazon app, and will go around to the large department stores like the Targets, the Walmarts, and find sales in their local area. And when they see any kind of arbitrage, they buy the product and stick it right online. And I know people that make six figures a month by having teams of people helping them with an arbitrage like that. So that platform example you gave, I think those are some good examples of what those platforms, how those enable. And that's a pure hustle. You can do that anywhere in this country, that there's Walmart, Target, and a mall, essentially.
That's cool. One of the things we might do for our diploma initiative at WEquil School is there's practical intelligence. Like, get kids to learn about money, finance, how to take care of a household, how to do your taxes, stuff. But like, one of the things we want to do to test that is have them make a certain amount of money relative to like the poverty line of their home country within 1 month. And there's tons of ways that you could do that. You could actually make a really cool product, but that's really hard. Another way would be to just line it, like use your network and line up a whole lot of people to buy your not so great product, but they like you, so they'll do it. But this would be cool to add to the list of ideas for students to try to start a business, is to basically go on eBay and try to arbitrage this stuff. But
I think it's a great idea. And seeing, like, I have, my kids are almost 10, and they ask a lot of questions about, oh, is this expensive? What is this? What is that? And it's so important. I mean, I was nobody ever talked to me about finances. I mean, I guess just over time as a teenager, I worked just because I like to hustle and make my own money. But when I was younger, I'm talking, my kids age third, fourth grade, nobody ever spoke to me about money. And I'm taking an example from you and others, and really trying to educate them, as much as they'll pay attention to, about the way, what a stock is. They're asking, I guess from YouTube, they're getting a lot of exposure to ironically, to crypto, and they know about Dogecoin. But I think it's extremely important, and kids that are exposed to examples like you just gave, or projects like that, I think they have a distinct advantage, coming up in the world, in this personalized economy.
yeah, well, maybe that's a good segue into so we hit one, then five. Now we're gonna hit three, ed tech, personalization and ed tech. The way we're approaching pretty much everything across WeQuil Group is based on first principles. But naturally, if we're going to be pushing things like personalization, uh, we want a school that's highly personalized. Like, we want to, like, you can imagine what's the best possible education for a particular young person. That's the way that we're trying to approach these degrees and then the diploma, but by building in a lot of flexibility. You got to have like these five pillars that we talk about at the school a lot, like different forms of intelligence: creative intelligence, practical intelligence, digital intelligence. But within those realms, though, give the young person flexibility so that they can personalize their education, that process in a way, so that they're, again, building themselves, making themselves irreplaceable, right? Really capitalizing on their strengths, as opposed to constantly being told to fix your weaknesses. That doesn't work very well. And you can try, it's slow. Like I'm a perfectly good example, as my wife can mention. I'm very, very slow at mitigating my weaknesses over time. But man, you get me in a spot where I can use my strengths, hopefully that can make up for it, right? So we're trying to do that with these kids, but there's a whole lot of other platforms that are doing this too. YouTube is a great example where, I mean, of course, I mean, if you want to get your kid excited about like history, then there's just tons and tons of different videos on history, and the point is to get them excited, right? Because then they'll learn all about all kinds of other stuff. So yeah, YouTube is big for that.
I bring
Coursera.
that up with my kids all the time as far as how lucky they are. I said I used to always have to read a book, and obviously, they'll read books sometimes, but there's only so much time they want to spend on that after school or whatever, at least my kids. And I say, okay, no problem. And essentially, sometimes I have to bribe them a little and say, you don't want to read a book on it, watch a YouTube video. I mean, and I think of how lucky they are to be able to do that. And a lot of these videos, even done by like not even necessarily corporations or large. I mean, a lot of these videos, the quality is great, and there's just such a wide variety. I've even used it to explain various religious concepts to them, which I
Mm-hmm.
guess falls under a similar category. But I think what an amazing thing that these kids have at their fingertips, and obviously they'll never realize. I guess I sound old saying this, but like how hard it was for us at times to have great information at our fingertips, other than reading books and books.
Well, there was an economy of scale with education too, right? So there's really two things that schools solved. One was having a way to learn, but then two, having a way to signal value, right? Those are the two fundamental problems they're trying to solve. Um, but there was an economy of scale. It takes money to build a library. It takes money, and you have to have a geographic location where you can put all of the professors and people that are knowledgeable and competent in various areas so that they can all coordinate. Like that's a tremendous effort. Um, and now like our everything's changed. I mean, it's just the economy of scale requirement, just like in many other areas of the economy, has just fallen away. It's just not even relevant anymore, except with like say car manufacturing. It's still definitely the case, but we even have like 3D printed houses that are popping out now. That was in one of Sume's articles from like a year ago when we were looking into this. It was wow. It's like wow, 3D printed house. I mean, it's a little house, but it's a house. Um,
So I'm
You
in the
know what?
real estate business, and I've spent a ton of time looking into how to. I've spent time with builders. Well, I wouldn't say builders, but companies that have these 3D homes essentially, and before they were just in like really. They were kept in a box, so to speak, as far as like design, and now they have such amazing. They have such an amazing variety of like ultra modern and just things that will really blow your mind as far as like the availability of design and look and feel of these 3D printed pre-manufactured homes. Unfortunately down here, I'm in South Florida, I actually did the math. I was thinking of putting up a bunch of these homes in a certain area that was gaining steam value wise. And it really, unless you did like 50 homes at once, the difference in price wasn't there yet versus building a regular home. But I think that's like a standard kind of thing that happens over time where eventually they just get down the price and it becomes more viable. But like you said, it's amazing as to I can tell you how far it's come. It really, all the houses used to look the same like 5-7 years ago. And now some of these look like spaceships. They're so cool.
what you mean houses are getting personalized?
Yep.
No, well, that's it though. That's totally it. You can build. It's basically like there's compartmentalization, right? So there's different kinds of materials that you're essentially piecing homes together like Legos. Some of these new technologies, right?
Totally.
You can even rebuild it and rearrange it later. So yeah, that's why I say that this is beautiful. This is so beautiful. When folks are like, I think that there's some people that are all worried about robots like taking over the world. We won't have jobs anymore.
There'll be just different
Like,
jobs.
what? No, they're going to be better jobs.
Yeah,
They're going to be
better jobs.
amazing
Different.
jobs. that's why it's like so exciting. Like the students at Sume's school, you know, they're creating businesses. Her Isla, she's 9. She's going to be coming on, or she won't be. I think she's going to have one of the representatives in the team come because she's tired. She wanted to go to the park and play, as any 9-year-old kid should, you know, do regularly. But you know, this blended mix app is like this is iterating to your perfect smoothie. This is personalizing the smoothie experiment, right? Or experience. But that's all about um, uh, essentially using, you know, her unique interest um, in health, but then also knowing how to build an app, and then she can make this business, and it's fabulous. That's why it's just a matter of like having enough people around you that you can be bouncing your ideas with, know yourself well enough that you can start to have better ideas for how to make money. Because you can implement them. We can scale ideas now. It's so great. So yeah, I'm not worried at all about the future. I think it's going to be extremely bright. Except for folks that think that you have to be miserable all the way through school, you know, and like never get to have any say in what you do. Um, and then like spend the rest of your life being told what to do by somebody else so that maybe someday when you're like 65 you can retire and finally be happy. For those people it's probably going to be pretty miserable. But for the rest of us it's going to be fabulous. What's
Yeah.
up, Michael?
Do you mind if I say a few words about ed
I
tech?
would love to hear your thoughts on this, man.
No, because what kind of the work that I do now, I spend all this time in higher ed, but now I focus really on at an ed tech company. And what we're finding when it comes to technology and the disruption side of it is really about measuring knowledge and transferring knowledge and the structuring the data and the potential that there's still a lot of barriers in the way to try to figure out how do you properly measure, because that's why the institutions are so heavily structured with curriculum, is because you need these stages and they're trying to measure knowledge creation and not always application of knowledge, but really knowledge creation. So I think there's a lot of potential there in figuring that out, whether that's through AI and connecting the dots between experience and then application in private, nonprofit, and for public sector is one side of it. The other thing is just the transfer of that. Our company really works on articulations and moving credit from experience-based evaluated, say it should be worth this much credit, to reduce the cost for example, we do for service members in the U.S. military. They measure it and say, you've done this, you should be able to get this much credit, and trying to, one, move that information from this into other systems is incredibly challenging. So overcoming that is key. And the second is finding out the different methods that can pressure the acceptance of those credit. Meaning basically businesses and people saying, yes, what they've done, whether they were in a formal education system or not, is proven that this is a highly valued skill that has credit. You should be accepting it. And they don't need to be at school here for 4 years in this very structured way, doing this. They could be there for 2 years. And actually, you talked about that having, there's all this discussion of institutions being disrupted. And until that model breaks of you have to go through this very structured system, you don't bring knowledge with you, we build all your knowledge, it's disrupted in the right ways. So it can be really personalized. It's going to take, I'm very hopeful that change will take place, but that's what we're trying to kind of disrupt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's very inefficient right now, a lot of higher education and how it's done. I don't know if that made any sense. Yeah, question, go ahead.
So one of the things I was thinking about, so one of the reasons a lot of people choose to go through higher education, to do higher education, is for immigration purposes, right? So a lot of people, say for example, I was one of those examples where I went to the United States to study and go through college in the US. And one of the reasons was I wanted to live in the US for a couple years. And I got that through visas, through my education. is there a solution? Is there a way where education technology can be integrated or can meet that same kind of purpose? Because I'm sure a lot of people around the world are going to continue using higher education and going to college because they want to immigrate to certain countries.
I actually, it creates somewhat more isolation in a certain sense, because if you could deliver the same content and not bring someone to your country and you can scale your institution, is difficult, which is, I think, unfortunate for a lot of international students. The downside of doing that for any economy is you're just stagnating your economy if you don't bring new knowledge and different ways of thinking to it. So I think there's a balance there. I think it's incredible. I mean, I've worked with thousands and thousands of international students that is their point, is to come and get an education in the US, to stay a bit longer. Some just don't want to stay a long time. They just want the experience here, because it is a very highly valued higher education system. It is well structured, it's well funded. It's how it can build. So I worry a little bit about with the online education, does that, and not allowing movement between, but I think that will continue to be overcome by the fact that you need the diversity of thought in order to truly build knowledge. All research shows that. Why are the most, the places that grow the best, metro even wise, is they have, either through their businesses or through higher education, are diversifying thought and allowing people to come up with new ideas and test new ideas. So I think that'll overcome it and still provide that opportunity for lots of international students. The other side of it is, there is, if Scott Galloway talks a lot about elite institutions. I think I forget it was him or someone else was talking about the fact that how come the best university in Canada can have like 50,000 to 100,000 students? It is the best university because they can do it at a whole different scale versus the best universities in the US. They make themselves elite by limiting the number of people that can study and experience that. If that gets broken up a little bit, because more schools get good at delivering online content, and it's proven to be as good at building skills and knowledge, I think that'll start to also create more opportunity. Again, there's that issue of visas. I mean, I've lived and worked in other countries and there were restrictions on me as a US citizen. Usually it's a benefit. So I don't know, did that get to your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
So I'm going to use some of these ideas to segue into our last two themes, just so we make sure we hit them. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about like this idea of a lot of people in higher ed are doing this as a way to immigrate. My wife was part of that. I was hanging out with Chinese and Indian people in college way more than I was like white dudes from Iowa, which is hard to do given that basically all the foreigners were only in that one city where I was. There are so many ways now to connect and build relationships with people around the world that those barriers are starting to break down. So why were they going through colleges? Well, part of it was almost impossible to build a trusting relationship with somebody on the other side of the planet. So it was, here, let's enroll you in this program. You do this thing. This allows you to meet people and then get opportunities down the road for work because you got to grow your network, which required you to be there. And that's over now. That's done. That was a huge reason why it happened, though. Now, if you can start to, so moving into blockchain, we've been talking a lot about decentralized autonomous organizations. This is a better way to organize, even if you're like neighbors with somebody. You're probably still going to want to use a DAO for many applications. That was coming off the back of several podcasts we've been doing, tons of writing. And we've got our team looking at DAOs right now is like 10 people. Most of them blockchain developers. It's an extremely powerful way to collaborate And it's not the only one enabled by software. It's just an extremely good example, and it happens to be in blockchain. And we were talking about the 5 themes, so I'm going to talk about that one. But you're able to build these relationships and collaborate with somebody without even needing to come into the United States. Well, what happens after you do that over the course of like a year? Or you're like Ari and you meet up with Ross through eBay and then you get to become buddies. Well, guess what? Opportunities will appear, and people will want to, you don't have to jump through nearly as many hoops if you really do need to be somewhere geographically and people know you and they know you're good. Well, guess what? you know it just gets that much easier for you to have that kind of immigration, company sponsorship, all that stuff. They could always do it, but they didn't know you. You didn't have a relationship. There was no trust. So now that changes. um so I think DAOs are just one example of that. But that also creates personalization. You're creating personalization not only just around businesses, but any kind of shared mission or purpose. So it can go beyond just for-profit businesses. It can also just be, the goals of any community that gets together. And the fact that it can happen uh, with people anywhere in the world, um, without even knowing their identities. I mean, wow, you want to talk about personalization of hobbies or personalization of ambitions. The DAO is like the most beautiful and elegant and perfect example of that. So maybe we only got like 11 minutes left before we need to hop on to our 4 o'clock. But what do you guys think before we hit the last one um, on genomics, or really healthcare? It's broader.
Mhm.
I guess we've talked so much about DAOs. We maybe don't need to here, because we can just say, look at the last 10 podcasts we did. Like,
The,
um,
the decentralized finance protocols that are coming up in the Ethereum blockchains are also very interesting value proposition. The way we're basically deinstitutionalizing insurance. Now, two parties don't need to go through a third-party intermediary to engage in an insurance contract. They can just use the blockchain network and have a smart contract. I think within the article there was a fantastic example related to crop insurance, where there was an algorithm that measured the average rainfall, and when there was a certain measure of low rainfall, the money that was put into a smart contract would be released, and all this would be moderated through an algorithm within the blockchain, instead of having, say, an insurance company have to regulate all of that. That's a very fascinating value proposition that DeFi offers. It is definitely something that can be personalized, because now there's more autonomy. People have more choice as to how they can handle things like finance and insurance. So that's another interesting aspect of this one final thing, aside from DAOs, which is
yeah,
also very, very useful.
yeah. No, there's a ton. I mean, the blockchain by its nature is going to be one in which, kind of like 3D printing, by its nature, it's going to end up creating more personalization. Just the fact that new kinds of dApps and coins keep getting created, uh, um, is, I think, just providing more and more options. I think it's also going to be one of the drivers of at least the downfall of a lot of NFTs, is that because it's so easy to personalize and create in the space, eventually the pace of creation of NFTs is going to be outpacing the amount of money flowing into the space, which will be the beginning of a bit of an overdue
Correct.
correction in the space. So sometimes personalization and zero cost to create can create problems.
Do you see some
Uh,
exceptions though, like certain NFTs maybe surviving that correction just out of like
and
sheer,
surviving, but frankly, like the investors in the space
yeah,
during that, it's going to be a switch in mentality from oh well, I'm in this and I'm trading this and here's what's happening day to day, and then when it starts to go down, then it becomes like, oh well, no, I believe in this, and then all of a sudden they're long-term investors that don't pay attention anymore, like until
Well,
I don't.
so how do we get the Mona Lisa to be something that maintains its value for like centuries, but then could an NFT also be like that in the sense that there's just one NFT out there that's just so culturally like impactful, something
Yeah,
everybody
no, Juan was very persuasive, and I get the idea. I get the basic value proposition of the signal that you're part of a tribe or community, right? Like if you own, it's not about being able to see the NFT because you can see pictures of the NFT, but if you can verify that you're the owner, and then there's a community or tribe of people that have strong beliefs about something, and that group of people is powerful in some way in the real world, then being an associate of that, being part of that, has value, right? um Same thing with like WEquil Group, like being part. So when you show proof of work at WEquil Group, then we elevate you, right? Like Ronan, like we're telling everybody they should check out Ronan's YouTube channel. Why? Because he's doing a lot of stuff for these kids, right? So that's, we don't have NFTs yet, but that would be a way of signaling that you appreciated what we're doing by like buying the NFT. We would be interested in you because you bought like, a WEquil Punk NFT, right? So I can see the value of that. Um, you just have to be really careful in any kind of market that looks a lot like tulips, and it does look like tulips because you can grow tulips, right? You can always grow more tulips, or you can always make more NFTs. Got to be careful. Anyway,
I actually just recorded another tutorial.
nice. Oh, thanks, Ronan. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm here to help.
Yeah, appreciate it. Oh my goodness.
quick remark.
This is so cool. This is one thing I really like about streaming all these demos. Ronan's still there and he pops in and be like, oh, just got done with another tutorial. Like, oh, that's so cool. Hey, sweetie pie.
I mean, I don't know if you know this, kind of a big deal recording video,
It's kind of a big deal. All right, so we got our last. Sume's getting ready because she's going to represent for her sister on Blend and Mix. But so the last piece of this that we're discussing is in healthcare. This is going to be really, really great. I mean, there's multiple pieces to this. Part of it is something we've talked a lot about already, and that is genomics and genome sequencing. And if you haven't gotten your genome sequenced, go check out the company Invitae. You can get it without insurance for $250. More than half of the health insurance payments that people make in any given year in the United States come from ailments that are at least correlated, if not caused by their genes. People should not be taking medications or accepting the prescriptions from their doctor without seeing like a genome report, like if not from Invitae, from one of the good ones, although I think they have the best one. It's incredibly important. Less than 1% of healthcare practitioners actually use it, but it's coming because it's so useful and it's so cheap. So that's a big part of how healthcare will become extremely personalized. Is we need to be using our data on our genes, which is like the epitome of what makes us,
So I'm not sure if this is entirely anecdotal, but like I do tend to see this trend where psychologically many potential genome sequencing patients are actually just scared to get their genome tested because they simply just don't want to know if they're going to have that genetic disease or not. They'd rather be like living in bliss, like blissful ignorance. So could that be a potential hurdle?
I think it's a really valid point. I can tell you from personal experience. So my mother died of breast cancer. And so my sister's in healthcare and cancer care as well. And like very sophisticated type of medical cases. And anyways, that being said, like, and she's in healthcare, so she's not afraid to deal with these topics, but she sees people all the time who they're like, well, my mom died of this. Like, I don't really want to, like, I don't want to, I'm afraid to get the test, like you said, for a couple of reasons. First of all, like, people don't, living in fear is like the worst way to live, right? And then the second thing is, you know, there's a lot of privacy concerns out there. And, you know, with the ever-changing healthcare landscape in the U.S., you know, political ramifications and whatnot. You know, there, who knows? I don't know. I don't think it'll happen because of, you know, morally, it would obviously be screwed up. But there's obviously many variables to, you know, somebody finding out that they're probably going to get something. For example, like, unfortunately, I had another personal experience. My old business partner's father had pancreatic cancer, which is very genetic apparently, and he literally, the guy lives in fear. Like, he's afraid. He's in his 40s and his dad died at, you know, 65 years old or whatever, and he literally talks about it all the time, how he's afraid that he's going to get it just like his dad did. And frankly, that's a terminal cancer like 95% of the time. So, you know,
Points, but rationally though, it is better to the value proposition of getting a genome test is to get it early, and then like that way you can come up with a treatment, because now you have more time to handle it and nip it in the bud. It just seems to me though that this is one of those things where like people need to learn to get over this psychological hurdle, because it is sometimes whatever the right thing to do is probably not the easiest thing to do. Like, get yourself tested and like have the answer to whether or not you have a genetic disease. But honestly, in terms of like overall utility for society, it would be a good idea to, in a way, try to come up with ways to educate people and help people realize that maybe it is better to get tested earlier on, even though it appears to be scary, since rationally it is the thing that can lead to a better outcome for you, since your odds of survival will increase knowing the information beforehand. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we
makes a
can
lot of
keep
sense.
going. We can keep going a little bit over this. I want to address this. And so I know we got a bunch of guys in the wings waiting to start with WEquil startups, but let's finish this discussion
I mean,
on
one
this
thing
piece.
is I didn't hear any of the conversation before, but I think one thing that some some companies are providing is like having all of your healthcare data and like all of the checkups and all of the things that they tested, having all that saved, so even if you go to a different hospital or a different doctor's office, they can have access to that. So that would just make it even more personalized, because not only do you have some things like your genetics um being like calculated into prescriptions and whatnot, but then you also have all of your history of like maybe you didn't react very well to something, or maybe just like seeing correlations between certain things and your health outcomes. But that's just
Oh
another
yeah,
thing.
that's huge, and that gets into the machine learning series that we also need to restart. Is that as we're digitizing patient information and digitizing outcomes for patients about different drugs and therapies, that even without getting your genome sequenced, we're going to be able to use machine learning models in particular to help tease out the causal factors and help to figure out who really should be trying a drug, and being able to lower the bar by knowing who's at lower risk. So that's another technology that's going to be driving a lot of this. The issue with the genome sequencing and worrying about people being fearful about it is, it's like you heard a lot of this too, this discussion when it came to social media and the internet, and this idea of like, oh well, people are going to be afraid of getting on the internet and sharing information on Facebook. And yeah, there's some people that do that, but like the degree to which um, households across the world at least created a Facebook account because it became a rather fundamental utility within the global digital economy to connect with other people, right? To just have their contact information. right? That's going to be happening with genome sequencing because it's so incredibly important in terms of driving health outcomes. So, 10 years out, doctors aren't even going to want to prescribe you a drug until you get your genome sequenced. They shouldn't be doing that now.
You're totally, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think unfortunately it kind of plays into the, I mean, look what's going on with the vaccine and just the distrust in the air that's been created. And it's just, at least in my opinion, based on a lot of fallacies. And to me, it's when I hear these people that, they're, doubting and think you're talking about microchips and all these conspiracies and these athletes that are role models to millions of people promoting, these types of things. I think it really goes back to that more than, I mean, practically you guys, I mean, I can't agree more, but there's just so many people that think that it's going to be used against them or something. And that's really the hump we have to get over. But I agree, those people will become the minority over time, if not now already.
Oh, well, eventually they're definitely going to become the minority because who's going to survive?
Exactly.
But it might take longer though.
But yeah, no, it'll take but the key issue here is that you're talking right now about less than 1%, well under. So maybe 30% of people never get it done. Yeah, but they're also like half those people are probably also the kinds of people that want to live under a rock and be off the grid and got their canned goods, like they're not even really, they're probably not even driving the public discussion for the most part. What the transformation is going to happen in terms of the people that we interact with, the people that have their head in the right place, and the ability to source not only getting better prescriptions, but then also being able to use telehealth to access different kinds of healthcare needs, different styles of delivering different health services, like even virtual, meditation or virtual coaching, virtual what you might call virtual therapies, and like it's amazing the kinds of things that you can do to personalize things that relate to health right now. It's fascinating. And I'm just beginning to kind of dive into some of this stuff more when we were writing that paper. But yeah, it's broader than genomics. It's broader than just machine learning helping us to figure out how best to help people. It's just the range of options, and that also gets into why I'm not worried about people being unemployed because of the robots. It's like, come up with a new and innovative way to do some kind of therapy virtually with people, because now you can do this for anybody. Make it appeal to 10,000 people. But I think we got to wrap up here so we can see our startups. So really great. This is so cool. Thanks, Bad Ronan, for popping in here to let us know how the tutorials were going. That was neat.
Yeah, gotta keep you informed. I actually have to hop off. I got a live stream in about 50 minutes, but I wanted to stay and listen.
Appreciate it. Michael, thank you for coming on and sharing all your thoughts about education. We're gonna keep that up. Thanks for popping in last minute too. We were having so much fun with other things. We're like, we need a guest speaker, and then you and Ronan were like, yeah, I could do it, sure. So that was great. Really appreciate it. And then of course, Rishi, Vishal, I don't know where we would be without you guys. You guys are just incredible. Keep it up. If you want to go ahead and turn off and Ari, of course, sorry. It's because you didn't have your video on. No. Thanks for popping in here, Ari.
Thanks for having me. Always learn something. I appreciate it.
Well, keep introducing us to amazing people. My goodness sakes. You just have this gift. Just keep doing it. So, okay.